Okay, it's almost ready.
I'm just trying to get the get something that's got one of the agenda in it. That's all.
You are now live.
Okay. Right. Welcome to this most recent special meeting of the Webster Groves Board of Education. Since we last met, we've conducted a series of conversations with parents and staff. We've also received additional guidance from St. Louis County. I want to thank everybody for participating in the process to date, be it by surveys, meetings, letters, and emails to the board. The objective of this meeting is to have Dr. Simpson and his team provide recommendations as to how we can start the next school year and to outline what the start will look like for each grade level or groups of grade levels. While the staff did everything they could at the end of the last school year, we recognized that we left a lot to be desired. And to that end, the staff and the administration have spent the summer working to ensure that we have better outcomes and in whatever manner those are delivered. And I just want to say that following this meeting, the individual schools are going to set up Q&A sessions for parents to get answers specific to their children's circumstances. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
And actually, I'm going to interject real quick because I'm getting a bunch of emails that there's an issue with the live. So if you can give me a second, I'm going to try to correct that, but we might have to redo exactly what you guys just all did for the first three.
All righty.
Let me work on that.
Let's just, yeah, so let's get that going then, because obviously whilst people can watch this subsequent, I know that this is, let's get this working right now. If I go online, what I'm seeing at the moment is it says the video is unavailable. So I guess as soon as you get that working, you can let us know.
Come back on that the one and get with Pat or maybe call her right now. For the link from the website, it says video unavailable. But when I click on the link in the agenda, and this could be part of the problem, but I go to our YouTube site, but it just says live stream offline.
We're all good now.
Okay, all right, let me just click on it again. Hang on.
Okay.
Still saying video. Well, let me go into the board website then. Hang on, let me see if it comes up differently if I click on that.
Tim, it's not showing up at least the link.
It says video unavailable.
Yeah, the board link still says video unavailable.
Tim, we're talking about the link that's on the banner on the homepage. It takes you to something that says unavailable. That's what the public's using.
Yes. And Tim, you're muted.
I'm going to send that direct link to Pat Weaver. Do you hear me
And
now?
Tim, when I go from the link on the board site, it just says live stream offline still.
Okay, I'm going to send this to Weaver to see if she can do it real quick.
Okay.
So we're going to go and replace the link on the board website.
Yeah. And I can do that real quick if you send me the link.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you email me that, Tim?
On the board website.
Yeah. And I can do that real quick if you send me the link.
Yep.
Can you email me that, Tim?
Yep, doing it now.
That's funny. So you're probably hearing the YouTube video. It's behind.
Yeah.
Yes. Which we're not seeing at all.
Email me that, Tim?
Yep, doing it now.
That's funny. So you're probably hearing the YouTube video. It's behind.
Yes. We're not seeing it.
Funny. So you're probably hearing the YouTube video. It's behind.
It's a loop, sorry. Loop, sorry.
We could set a beat to this, perhaps.
All right.
We could.
Yeah.
We could set a beat to this, perhaps.
We could.
Yeah.
And I don't know when you're adding the new link in, John, if you're able to sort of put something on there that says updated link added, please click again or something like that.
John, did that link work for you? Okay.
Could someone send me the link? Because Facebook's asking a lot of questions. And I'll just post it there too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Kathy, can you put something out right now that just says we're having technical difficulties, we're addressing them, we'll get this out as soon as we can?
Yes, I've been doing that. And as soon as I get the new link, I'll say here it is. But yes, I've told them on Facebook.
Excellent, thank you.
So the link we put was wrong. Can you change it? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yep, that's me. So, bye. Weaver is doing that right now to update the homepage. And I'll let you know when that homepage is live.
And then you're going to send the link, once you've got that working, you're going to send the link to Kathy as well.
Yep, Kathy already has it.
Okay, great.
I just got a text from a community member saying he is on and can see us,
Okay, all right, that's good.
for what that's worth.
As an FYI, I would just also assume that our conversation is streaming live at this
Yes.
point.
Yeah, I just clicked on again and it's not, at least, I guess if I update the district website, perhaps. It's still saying video is unavailable to me from the website link.
Me too, but I just saw my face in a Facebook post, which was a little weird. people are seeing us.
Okay, all right. Well, for anybody who's able to link in at the moment, we're just we're trying to resolve the technical issue so that we can get this up on the YouTube site, and we will we'll begin as soon as we're able to do that, because obviously not everybody's going to be able to reach this from the Facebook site, or is going to know to reach it from the Facebook site, and we want to make sure this is as widely available as possible. We apologize.
Yeah, and I let folks know that we were not proceeding with the meeting until the technical difficulties are fixed. So
Thank
you
you
might
very
want to
much.
reiterate that, David, when we're live again,
Yeah, okay, absolutely, I'll do that.
so people know they didn't miss anything.
Right.
Pat is reworking on that link because on her end, she was not able to get it through.
All right, it's okay. Best laid plans.
Yeah, for what it's worth, my contact texted and said that he got it off the board docs page and it was working from there.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I want to just sort of make sure it's working off the district page, because that's where everybody else is going to be getting it from. That's all.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Even if Pat could put a link just to the board docs page.
All right. And Tim, you'll just let us know when you think this is all working.
Yep.
Thanks.
Kathy, can I suggest that even if she can just go to the website and put the URL, just type it, don't even attach a link to the board docs that has the video, because you can jump from.
Something that says new URL now has just come up.
If you could just put in text, if it's a link issue, if she could just put in a text like another banner, that would suffice, and people could just even parentheses copy and paste.
Okay, we're up live now. So the YouTube is working now. Yeah.
The YouTube, we've been on for a while. It's just a matter of not jumping from the website. That's why I'm just trying to encourage a different.
Okay.
But now too, the website works.
It still says video unavailable to
Yeah,
me.
it's not showing that.
Reboot. If you reboot. If you reboot your website, then you'll see it says new URL, and you can actually get in on the.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So it's now up.
close that tab and then go back to the district webpage, click it, and it should work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you all for your patience with this.
Okay. And it looks like we've got about 420 people watching so far. So it looks like it's working better now. All right. Okay, good. I'm going to give it one more minute just for everybody just to have a chance. So if somebody can put out on a Facebook that we've got things working now, and we'll go. So just give it one more minute before we start again. All right, we'll sort of start or restart again. So thank you, everybody. Welcome. Apologies for the technical difficulties that we have been having. I want to assure everybody that we have not conducted any business prior to sort of coming on now. It looks like it's all the live stream is working now. I'm not going to repeat my entire statement that I made, but what I do want to say to everybody is that so Dr. Simpson and his staff are going to provide recommendations as to how we can start the new year, and they're going to outline what that's going to look like for each grade level. And then following this meeting, each of the individual schools is going to get in touch with the parents of the students that will be attending those schools to discuss, to offer a Q&A for parents as to exactly what opening will mean for the various students at those schools. So I think I'm just going to, again, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, so that's passed. I draw everybody's attention to the correspondence log. We've had lots of communication from members of the community. We're very grateful for all the emails, texts, and the various comments we've had as well, obviously, for all of the participation in the survey and then in the various forums as well. And Dr. Simpson and his team are going to talk about those later on. If no one's got any questions about the communications log, we will move straight on to item 3, which is reopening of schools. And so, John, I'll turn it over to you to start off, and then obviously there'll be. I know that board members have submitted various questions to Dr. Simpson in advance, and then obviously we'll have time for Q&A following the presentation as well. So, Dr. Simpson, it's over to you.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon to everybody. We are excited to be here and share with you our plan. It's a pretty challenging time, as you know. Before we go into what this year looks like, which I know everybody is interested in, I did want to come back again to thanking the staff of the Webster Grove School District for all they did last spring to care for kids as best they could, as well as care for one another. It was an incredibly challenging, difficult time that all of us were thrust into, both professionally and personally. And I do feel like the work of the staff, was heroic in a lot of ways in terms of having to really shift on a dime how you connect with kids or how you provide instruction for kids, 5-year-olds as well as 18-year-olds. How do you care for them when their families are being affected in really indirect and direct ways, some very deeply, some very hurtful and harmful. I also want to be thankful to our community who was supportive of one another, I believe. That was gracious for us because our work is best done face-to-face. While some kids are better in a virtual setting, the overwhelming majority of our kids are learn better, connect better, all those kind of things face-to-face. It's a relationship-driven business. Learning is a social endeavor, and while we have social media these days, that's best done in community with one another. So I do feel like our community was supportive of our work, very complimentary of the work last year. I think they were gracious because, like Mr. Addison said, that it was a steep learning curve. And we did learn a lot. And we learned a lot through our successes as well as our errors. So I appreciate that graciousness and that gratitude. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We've got a presentation that will address a number of the questions. We'll open it up after that. My staff will jump in and kind of share along the way. Can you see a slide that says returning to school at this point? Thank you. So Mr. Addison said, we are, and it's actually, we changed it and I didn't tell David that, sorry, David, but we are going to have 3 Zoom sessions coming up this coming week that will allow elementary families, middle school families, and high school families to get on a Zoom call with district administrators as well as building level administrators to talk about our return to school plan and implications for students and families at that level. These will also be communicated out later today when we push out correspondence to all families. Just coming back to our principles of our reopening plan, I think is important. We want to protect the physical and the mental health of all of our children, as well as the staff that are in our care. That will always be number one. We say that all the time, not just in extraordinary circumstances like we're in right now. It's critically important for us as an educational institution to support the academic well-being of all of our students, pre-K through 12th grade. It's important that we do whatever we can to ensure equity and access to learning and supports for all students and their families. That's a priority. And that at all times, we must remain flexible and agile. Our staff, our district level administrators, our curriculum people are tweaking and modifying plans moment to moment. Our building level principals are doing just the same, and they are deserving of a whole lot of praise, in my opinion. We don't have answers to all the questions, but we're working towards the answers that we don't currently have. We have made the decision at this point in grades kindergarten through 12th to come out in our responsive learning plan in the virtual learning stage. I'll talk a little bit about that. You will see at the title that we have listed August 24th to October 23rd as the time frame with which we're committing to being in that for all students in that particular plan. We desperately...
John, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you advancing your slides? Because I'm still on the home slide.
Oh, really? Is that the same for everybody?
Same as on the YouTube video. I have that next to me.
Oh.
Yes.
Glad you said that.
And I think strictly, John, aren't you making a recommendation that the board is being asked to approve?
Correct. This is the recommendation. Are you QC now?
Now I see K-12 responsible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we've made the decision is we really do want to be back in schools. And I know people are in different spots with that. Even within our own district, within our own communities, there are people that feel like absence of vaccine, that they're not going to be comfortable in our schools. And I understand that. Given the importance of public education and the role that it plays in our kids' lives now, from an academic side, from a social emotional overall health and well-being side, thinking of all the supports that we provide our kids, I think it's critically important that we get back in our schools as soon as we can. We will have to, in my opinion, live with, again, without a vaccine to COVID. But as soon as we're in a spot where we can do that, I'm of the opinion that we need to. We've set October 23rd as kind of the band by which we're going to commit to being in a virtual learning plan and this responsive learning plan for our K through 12 students, with the intent of the board meeting 2 weeks prior, bringing a recommendation to the board of if we continue in virtual learning, with all levels or some levels beyond October 23rd, or if we shift to either the hybrid model or the in-person model. And I'll talk about the factors that we're looking at and considering at this point. What I would like to have as part of this discussion today is discussion regarding the Walter Ambrose Family Center. I'll share some of my thoughts and thinking related to that in a moment, but would like your decision on that, or not your decision, but where the board sits with that. Again, we have students that today, and I'll talk about this again, we're going to push out a form for people to create. We have families that for sure know that they want to be a part of the virtual environment all the time, that until there's a vaccine or until we get a whole lot better, I want to guarantee that my students have a spot in a virtual environment to learn. So we have that option, as we've said, for parents to be able to make that selection. For the others, you're in that responsive learning plan. And today we're articulating in K through 12 that we're going to start in this virtual learning side. Knowing that a goal would be to get our kids back into the building as soon as we possibly can. Rationale for decision, the current data and the research on COVID-19. As I presented to the board before, 4 to 5 weeks ago, I felt based on the community data that we were seeing in terms of rates of transmission, in terms of testing, that we were going to be in a much better spot to open. But what we're seeing right now with community transmission is concerning. And that's not just concerning to me, a person who is not a scientist, who is not an epidemiologist, but it's concerning to a whole lot of people who have more knowledgeable than me with related to that. So that is certainly a primary driver in the K-12 virtual decision. The ability to support student learning in the virtual format, sorry, off the tee. I do feel strongly that we will be providing our students with a much improved virtual learning experience that prioritizes, again, that equity of access, that prioritizes the academics, that prioritizes social emotional learning in a much improved way. Do I have more concerns for our kindergartners and first graders and their ability to access their academics and all that they need to do in a virtual environment? Most certainly, absolutely, 100%. But I do feel like we're going to be improved, and Jason will kind of talk to a little bit about that in a little bit. The other concern that I have is with staffing, and it's really thinking through, and again, districts, companies are seeing this right now, thinking through if staff are having to quarantine and if staff are having to stay home because they're symptomatic. I would say that I personally my team could take over for me. They could take over my duties. They could take over my responsibilities, or I could do mine remotely pretty easily. But if we were to be back in person, if it was a staff member who was an AP physics teacher or a staff member who's a second grade teacher who all of a sudden had to be out for 14 or more days due to quarantine or was symptomatic for 4 days, it would be a real big challenge to support those kids in the physical classroom in that sense. We would work like heck to do it. And we know that if we're back in person, we'd have to, but that's a very real challenge. And again, one that we're seeing and other districts and organizations are seeing real time in person. Where I am in preschool is there, I've talked about the transmission data. And again, we've been in conversations with a lot of, with different epidemiologists and doctors. The data, the incident rates, are very, very, very low for younger children. Very low for children below the age of 5, and low still for children, to be honest, under the age of 10. It's lower. Now that 10 to 19 band is one that we're seeing grow regionally. The incidents are not super big, but they're a lot bigger than they had been. So the data on incidents, the data on transmission of younger children to younger children or younger children to adults is very favorable. That said, kind of like all of the data and research at this point, it's a new game. The research is coming out new all the time, given we've only been talking about COVID in the U.S. probably since February. The importance of early childhood education. And again, you can certainly create the argument, I could for a kindergarten, first grade as well, but the importance of the early childhood experience and the difficulty with doing it virtually, it's pretty much insurmountable. So again, it's an important stage in a child's life. We know the research in support of early childhood education to accomplish and to educate kids in a virtual environment. Again, tough in kindergarten, near impossible, if not impossible, in a virtual learning environment to the level they need. The benefit of the staffing, so still having staff that would have to quarantine possibly, still having staff that would have to go home being symptomatic. The ratios at our early childhood are considerably favorable. We have ratios of approximately, was shared with me today, for example, like in our 2-year-old room, 1 staff member to every 4 kids. And so our ability to group and cohort, shrink the numbers, our ability to continue on with learning the next day if a staff member has to quarantine or stays home symptomatic is much more doable than in a K-12 space where it's only 1 teacher in there. Here's some of the data that I've mentioned. It's really just a sampling. The data on the left comes from a COVID Act Now website, and it's out of Georgetown University, where it'll show you right there. Those are 2 samplings of data that will show you the first one, daily new cases per week on 100,000 population of 100,000. This is St. Louis County data. Both of these are St. Louis County data. And you could see that in the recent weeks, again, back when we were thinking we would be definitely leaning more in person, the data looked differently in terms of transmission. What they report, as you can see in the text from this data, is that if the rates continued as they would within the year, that you would have 50% of St. Louis County that would be infected with COVID or have been infected. And then infection rates is looking at the transmission of the disease for our virus from one to another. And we are in the critical stage with the rates, and then we're approaching critical with the infection rate. On the right side, you can see this is data from the St. Louis Coronavirus Task Force. This has been updated. The data on the left was updated this morning. The data on the right was from yesterday. They may have the new data on, but that shows you hospital admissions and hospitalizations. I think one of the things that we are certainly noticing too is that while we have more people that are getting the virus, there are less people that are falling seriously ill. What's the reason for that? We don't know exactly. Is it a mutation in the virus? Is it delay in testing? Is it more people that are being tested because they're worried? There's a lot of reasons for that. Are people better quarantining, keeping safe? I don't know. There's differences of opinion, but that's certainly some of the data. As David had shared, we've been trying to engage the public and our teachers as best we can as we continue working. We did the surveys in May, June. We did our surveys recently. This is some of that data. The data from the respondents who would you want to do a full virtual program coming out of the gate, no questions asked. 37.7% of our community said yes, that they would. And that's an average. And that was just for we asked community to kind of put a mark for each student. So I would say about a little over a third community said that they would want to do a virtual regardless of what we provided. 62% wanted to be a part of that responsive learning plan. Some of those people have expressed to me, like, If we didn't come out in the virtual environment, I'd want to switch. But some of those people clearly want us to be in person right now. Just I threw on the data. It was just interesting to me that approximately 50% of our families have one child in the system. The other 50% have multiple children in the system. And then down below, coming back to that equity piece, and again, some of it has to do with resources. Now it's differently for families. How many families that would need to find adult supervision for students if we were in a virtual or hybrid environment? And that's about a quarter of our families. It's a whole lot of people that are impacted by this particular decision, and we have great empathy for them. Some additional data, you can see it's about a quarter too that would need technology, computer devices. And it shows we have about 25 families. We know all families didn't complete the survey, but about 25 families noted that they would need support with internet, and we'll be able to take care of families with those things. Here's some data as it relates to the staff. Those are staff that are going to be impacted in terms of they're going to need to find a support if the school districts or the private parochial schools that their children are at, if we go virtual, that they might be impacted by this. They might need to find childcare. On the right, you can see the number that would be interested in being a part of a virtual program, and then those that would not be interested in teaching in a virtual program. The interest varies based on people that, for a variety of different reasons. In the virtual format, just highlighting some of the differences between, again, if I'm a parent and I sign up for the Webster Groves virtual program, what does that entail? One, I'm choosing that format as a parent. I'm all in as a parent, that's my choice. The format is in place for the entire semester. We're going to offer it both semesters, but it's in place for the entire semester. No matter what district decisions are made to come back or not, I'm in, I'm guaranteed, I've got my teachers. The commitment in the virtual program is to try and place students with their peers from their current elementary school. We don't know if we'll be able to do a class of all Clark students or all Bristol or fill in the blank, because we don't know what the needs are going to be at the school. We have an idea now based on our preliminary surveys and the data we collected, but we can't ensure 100% that you're going to be with all kids from your current school or a teacher from that school. We feel good that we'll be able to do that for the most part, but we just can't guarantee it. If you're in that virtual programming, there's going to be more limited course offerings by Webster Groves School District teachers. We'll ensure at the high school level, we'll have everything in place to meet graduation requirements. But we want to try in the virtual environment as best we can to staff anything we offer with district teachers. And we have only so much capacity. We can't offer whatever the number of courses are at Webster Groves High School to everybody in every format. So we have to make decisions on that. If you're in the responsive learning plan and we're in the virtual learning format, which we are now, that's going to be our choice of which format you're in. The format will be in place for a minimum of 9 weeks. The elementary students are going to be placed with students from their current elementary school. And then you'll have a more expansive list of course offerings at 6 through 12. So I wanted to highlight some of the difference between, I said March 23rd because that was the day we came back from spring break, and the game changed before that. But when we were back with kids, we actually started 2 days later, and what we'll be coming out of the gate with on August 24th. So first of all, we'll be using Canvas as our management system, our learning management system, in place of Google. Our virtual learning, whatever program you're in, if we're virtual, we'll have daily live instruction, face-to-face, every day with a teacher, but there also will be an asynchronous component. And we're very mindful of the working families or the families juggling 3 children at home, that we're going to have to provide videos for families of the live so that you can access it when it's good for your family. In March 23rd, there was some live, but it wasn't daily, and it was largely asynchronous. In March, we were hold harmless in terms of grading. In August, start coming out of the gate, we will have our traditional grading practices. In March of 23rd, the professional development, we jumped in, and our teachers had to kind of learn on the fly. We supported them as best they could, but they were learning how to do online instruction, teaching all by themselves for the most part. This time around, we're providing them with quite a bit of professional development. Is it expansive? Is it a course? No, but we're doing as best we can to give them a lot of instruction on not just Canvas, but how to teach in this environment. We cared for the social emotional support of the kids, again, using our current structure, trying to apply it in a virtual format as best we could. This year, we're working with Alive and Well to develop action plans to care for both our children and our adults, and to monitor the effectiveness of those plans throughout the entire year. Last year, our plan was informed by immediate feedback, learning by doing, along with a community survey at the halfway point. This time around, our plan is informed by experience. Again, what we did well, what we didn't do well. And then we'll have feedback from you, stakeholders, in the spring. So those are some, not all, but some of the key differences. I apologize. The program that I used to create that Venn diagram, my eyes aren't as good, and I apologize for all those errors in my print there. I'll turn it over with Jason, who's going to articulate what the schedules will look like.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as we begin to think about tentative schedules for this upcoming school year, I do have tentative schedules for K2, 3rd through 5th grade, Steger in terms of 6th grade, the middle school, and the high school. There are a few things that I want to point out before we go into actually looking at the tentative schedules in terms of what we had to consider as we were looking at all of these aspects. I will say that I really appreciate the time and the commitment from building administrators to partner with me and to work through these drafts of tentative schedules. And so I feel good about what we're able to share with you today as far as these tentative schedules go. So our goals really were to look at consistency across schools and across grade levels. One of the things, especially at the elementary level, that we wanted to make sure that we were providing were for students who were participating in the full virtual program and the students who were participating in the virtual phase of the responsive learning plan, that they had similar experiences. And so we have worked to try to establish that. With that consistency, we hope to allow for collaboration across buildings, especially in terms of the elementary schools. Consistent start times, that was some of the feedback that we received around trying to start school at a similar time to when live and in-person school starts, and in school at a similar time around when in-person school starts. That was very important because as we begin to think about future phases of the responsive learning plan, we want to make sure that what we're planning now can then minimize disruptions as we move forward, let's say into a hybrid situation or into an in-person situation. We also looked at the consistent use of staffing. And so how can we consider that as we're building these schedules? And I do have to say that our schedules had to be built around a typical school 7-hour school day. Dr. Simpson spoke in the last slide around some grace that we were given in terms of attendance, in terms of instructional minutes. We don't necessarily have that grace going into the start of the school year. And so we do have to look at attendance requirements. We do have to look at instructional hours and make sure that our schedules and our offering align with those requirements. As I just mentioned, planning now to minimize as many disruptions as we possibly can later in the school year, especially in the responsive learning plan. Dr. Simpson mentioned more live instruction. Every day we are offering daily opportunities for live instruction and flexible asynchronous learning. And so a lot of the feedback we've received, some families want live instruction, some families want the flexibility of asynchronous instruction. We've done our best to try to balance both pieces. And I feel like we've tried our best to hear all of those perspectives, and we've tried to include that in these tentative schedules. Live instruction, as Dr. Simpson said, will be recorded for review at a later time, and that will be placed in Canvas so that students can go back either if they participated in the live instruction and want to review it again, or if they are unable to do so, it is available quickly for them to do so at a time that is available for them. And then we also had to consider ability to continue to share staffing across the district to provide as many courses as possible with a Webster Groves teacher. And so that's the key. You may look at other school district schedules and perhaps compare those schedules with our tentative schedules. Again, our goal was to try to get as many Webster Groves teachers with our students in a virtual realm as possible, and to try to minimize, to the best of our ability, having to reach out to additional vendors to provide those services. But we will have to do that in some cases. A few definitions as we begin to look at the schedule. So when we talk about synchronous learning, thank you, John. If you can go back to the one more slide, go forward. Thank you. Synchronous learning, the kind of learning that happens in real time. So imagine that right now I was your teacher and you were the student. This would be a synchronous situation. We were all learning at the same time. We were interacting at the same time. This means that the teacher and students are interacting again in a learning experience together. This type of format provides structure. There have to be set times in order to be able to accomplish this. There has to be a daily schedule in order to be able to accomplish synchronous learning. Then when we talk about live virtual instruction, this aspect of instruction is typically provided as part of synchronous learning. And in our situation, just like right now, live virtual instruction will occur using Zoom for whole group situations, small group, and one-on-one settings. When we talk about asynchronous learning, the kind of learning that happens at any time. And so all students may not be working on the same task at the exact same moment, which allows for flexibility. I just wanted to make sure that we had that understanding as we move forward and look at these tentative schedules. So as we think about K2, and again, I have to say I'm a former first grade teacher, and so I understand the requirements. I also understand the challenges that some of this work will pose, and we will just have to work the best that we can and partner together with our families and with our staff to provide as much support as we can for our students, especially our younger friends. So looking at this particular schedule, what you'll notice when I want to highlight, and I'm not going to walk you through every aspect of that, but you will notice that we are providing a classroom community time where students can show up at the exact same time, similar to what they would do during a typical school day, an opportunity to connect with one another, to do check-ins as far as social emotional concerns happen with students, to build community, to do all of those typical things that would normally happen in an in-person environment. This is also an opportunity for counselors, perhaps principals, to pop in and to provide additional support for students as needed. Then the way that we have developed our K2 and our 3rd through 5th grade schedule, they're broken into 2 learning blocks. And so within these learning blocks, you'll see that from 8:20 until 10:20, there's a literacy focused learning block. And then in the afternoon, 12:05 to 2:05, there's a math, science, social studies, and a specials learning block. And so this would be a combination of live virtual instruction, and then there would need to be some asynchronous learning experiences, because the goal would be that the teacher would be meeting in small groups and with individual students outside of whole group learning time. Very similar to the formats and the structures that we use in in-person learning. Then you'll notice that there's time for independent work, which would be the asynchronous component. That could look like writing your story in your writer's notebook for feedback the next day during the literacy block. That could look like independent handwriting practice. That could look like practicing your math facts, etc. We also bumped that time up intentionally to the lunch break and the free play time, knowing that that would allow for more flexibility for our younger students in terms of perhaps some away time from the screen. Then again, as you look at the afternoon, you'll notice an additional learning block set up very similar. The idea would be that our specialists, art, music, PE, health, would have an opportunity for a 30-minute session to drop into that particular Zoom link with that class, provide their instruction, and then there would be an independent component related to the learning that day. And then again, finishing the day with independent work and additional learning support as needed. I want to look over just to make sure that I have included everything. Reading intervention, math intervention, gifted services, and special education. Our goal, our hope is that we will be able to provide all of this for all of our students who are in need. That is very much at the forefront of the next phase of what we are going to be doing. We are not going to be able at this time to develop an individual schedule for every student regarding when gifted services will be provided or when reading intervention will be provided. That will all have to happen like it typically does at the beginning of the school year once we have assessment information, et cetera. But we will, and our plan is to begin to provide that as quickly as we possibly can. All right, let's move to 3rd through 5th grade. Again, you'll notice a very similar structure. Again, we're working within that 7-hour school day. A lot of elementary schedules are designed around specialist time. So art, music, and PE, since we're using the same adults, we have to make sure that specials aren't happening at the same time. And so what you'll notice is that the literacy block for 3rd through 5th grade, that has actually been moved to the afternoon learning block, and the morning learning block would be math, science, social studies, and specials to allow for the same PE teacher, the same art teacher, the same music teacher to provide those special supports. A lot of the programmatical offerings would stay the same as to what we would be able to offer in K2 as well. And again, we'll be partnering with principals, partnering with our coordinators, and partnering with teachers and families to determine individual plans and how we can best provide support in these schedules. 6th grade. So 6th grade, we actually have 2 schedules, and I want to talk through this. So there is a tentative Schedule A, which would apply to students who are in the virtual phase of the responsive learning plan. Schedule B, which I'll show you in just a moment, applies to students who are in the parent choice opted-in virtual program. The big difference between these programs are the exploratory rotation. We are not required by DESE in terms of instructional minutes at the 6th grade level to offer exploratory courses. We have to provide access to those courses in 7th through 8th grade. Within the virtual phase of the responsive learning plan, there will be 6 learning periods. There will also be an opportunity to connect with the classroom community. Those 6 learning periods will include their 4 core content areas with a specials rotation, and then continuing the exploratory rotation that we have typically offered at Steger. That is only true in the virtual phase of the responsive learning plan. We will continue to provide reading intervention services, gifted services, special education, and we've also built in daily learning support time for students who may need one-on-one support, who may need to interact with a counselor, et cetera, outside of their academic time. And again, each learning period will consist of a combination of live virtual instruction and asynchronous learning. So as you look at this schedule and as you look at the future schedules for secondary schools, thinking about first hour, I'm looking at it from 8:10 to 9:05. The first portion of that, if we think about splitting that block into 50% live instruction and then 50% asynchronous instruction, if I were the teacher, I would probably start out with live instruction and then move to asynchronous instruction based on the learning that they did with me live. That could look different. There could be content areas, and some content areas will and have explored the idea of a flipped classroom, where you may end up watching a video of the instruction, and then our time is better spent processing through that video, through discussion, through projects, through debate, through conversation. So it really will just depend on the need of that content and the decisions of the teacher in terms of how they wanted to structure that. But again, the ultimate goal is that we're 50% live virtual instruction, which again would be recorded for later use, and then 50% asynchronous instruction with support available from the teacher. So let's move to the next 6th grade schedule. Again, it follows a similar format. However, because we've removed the exploratory rotation, because again, it's not a requirement, it's a hope, and we wish we could provide that, but we are not able to do it in terms of staffing. Everything would pretty much be consistent, except there would, instead of 6 learning periods, there would be 5 longer learning periods that would provide for the 4 core content areas, the specials rotation, which is required, but there would not be an exploratory rotation within the 6th grade virtual program. Everything else would be consistent as far as the other 6th grade schedule. If we can move to the tentative 7th and 8th grade schedule. Again, looking in terms of periods and times, very consistent with the 6th grade schedule and with what happens at Hickson currently. And again, that thinking was, how can we minimize as much disruption as we potentially move into other phases of the responsive learning plan? And so our schedule was developed with that thinking in mind. This schedule would be consistent, so different than what 6th grade, where 6th grade has 2 schedules. This would be a consistent schedule between the virtual program and students who are participating in the virtual phase of the district responsive learning plan. It would include 7 learning periods, so the 4 core content areas, 1 PE and health class, and then 2 electives. This particular elective area, I have to be completely transparent. We are still in the process of determining which electives we can offer in a virtual setting and how we can use staffing, because it's important to know that staffing, especially related to electives, are shared staff between different buildings. And so trying to work through all of those offerings so we can offer as much as possible with a Webster Groves teacher, that is our goal. But we also want to be prepared that possibly some of the specialty course offerings may need to be provided 7th and 8th grade and at the high school through another vendor, such as Launch, such as Edgenuity, which is something I'll talk about when we get to the high school schedule. We would also continue to provide reading intervention, math intervention, gifted services, and special education. There has been daily learning support time built into this schedule. And then each learning period would consist of that 50-50 combination of live virtual instruction, which again would be recorded and placed in Canvas, and then asynchronous learning. We want to move to the high school schedule. So the high school schedule, in terms of meeting with building administration from the high school, we feel like we needed to change the overall structure of how we offer courses at the high school in order to be able to best meet the needs of each of our kids. And so what we have done, again, this schedule would be consistent in the virtual program and also in the virtual phase of the responsive learning plan. We would offer 4 courses per semester. So this is known as a 4x4 schedule. And so if we were in person and even virtually, instead of offering the typical number of courses over the course of a year, we would actually offer fewer courses for a longer period of time in one semester. So students are still getting overall instructional time. We're not having to dilute the curriculum, the content. They're still getting that. It's just a longer period of time and less offerings over a semester. So for example, a year-long class within a semester would have more focused instructional time. So in a traditional model, you would take a full year-long class. We would actually only have that class one semester, but it would be additional time to complete that class within that semester. So instead of offering, a 45-minute period over the course of the entire school year, you're now offering a 90-minute period within one semester. Same would be true with a semester class within a quarter. So a semester class that would typically run half the year, we would offer it within a quarter, but the amount of instructional time would double. So we're not losing instructional time, we're not losing content. It just allows for more flexibility. The high school administration felt very strongly about this schedule change in order to be able to try to provide as much flexibility as we can in terms of staffing and in order to meet the needs of our students, especially with Webster Groves teachers, as much as we can. Daily learning support time has been built into the schedule. And then again, that 50-50 idea of each learning period would consist of a combination of live virtual instruction and then asynchronous learning. In terms of this next slide, in meeting with the high school administration, and again, our goal is to be as transparent as we possibly can as we're working through this. We feel like in order to meet graduation requirements in all the key areas, this would be a minimum course offering for 9 through 12 in the virtual program. Obviously, students who participate in the virtual aspect of the responsive learning plan would have more access to more courses. But for the virtual program, this is at a minimum of what we would be able to offer in terms of graduation requirements. Again, you'll notice at the bottom, more courses could become available. That's the work of the rest of this week and into next week to look through individual schedules and to determine what additional things we can offer for this virtual program. But at a minimum, this is what we would be able to offer. And then also we're looking at possible partnerships with Launch and Edgenuity, which is a similar type vendor to Launch, to provide courses that Webster Groves School District cannot offer. As we move to the next slide, thinking in terms of professional development and how we're going to support our staff. Before I move into this, I just want to remind everyone that all of our certified staff have been asked to complete what we believe is a 12-hour course this summer related to Canvas. And Tim Brown has done a brilliant job creating the content for that. We've both worked with Canvas to develop what that can look like. So this learning plan was built with the assumption that teachers have a basic understanding of Canvas coming in to the beginning of the school year. And so as we look at additional professional development, we're really looking at it in terms of 5 focus areas. The first, again, based on feedback from staff and community, is how do we provide engaging and interactive live instruction for students in a virtual format, providing that community building, team building, and collaboration opportunity for students in a virtual setting. So doing not what I'm doing right now, where I'm just speaking at you, but how do we create opportunities for you to connect with each other, for you to have dialogue with each other, just like we would in the in-person classroom. Then offering meaningful feedback for students in a virtual setting. Again, that was based on feedback from the spring. An additional step would be providing small group and one-on-one supports for students in a virtual setting. And then obviously our 5th focus area would be continued Canvas learning and support. And I just want to make a note that in each of these areas, we know that there's a need to know how to actually do it. So how to create a Zoom breakout room, how to share your screen in Zoom, some of those technical pieces, but then how do you also use that technology to provide instruction? And so each of these offerings will include both of those pieces. As we look at the next slide in terms of training support for families, we will be offering virtual workshops outside of what the Q&A sessions are that are set up for next week for families focused on Canvas. They will be recorded so that folks who can't, due to schedules, whatever, would have access to them at another time, or even if you did attend and you want to review it and continue to learn, it will be available. Tim will be creating video tutorials available focused on Canvas. And then we will be offering some Q&A sessions specifically focused to Canvas for families. And our goal is to have as much of that available before school begins to minimize any stress and anxiety for our families, because we know overall this is a stressful situation, and we want to make sure that our students and our families feel as prepared as they possibly can be entering into the school year. And then also IT support for families focused on Canvas. They have a pretty sophisticated response plan in terms of Canvas. And so making sure that our families know how to access that. Obviously, IT support would be available within the district for district-related devices and things such as that. but in terms of Canvas, they have a pretty robust support system in place to support users of Canvas.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, for that. And just kind of before we move on to, excited that Katina Lyles is here to share about special education, but what we wanted to articulate, and I say this at the very bottom on some of the three of the big things that we're changing in our plan is one, we're going to be asking parents, families to commit to an entire semester, regardless of whether the students start off in the Webster Groves virtual program or the responsive learning plan. And that is largely driven by the impact of students moving on staffing. Okay, so for example, if you have 15 students that move from a in-person experience or the responsive learning plan to the virtual environment, we could accommodate that within the virtual environment. But then the issue would be in the classroom with which they left, does that classroom now have 3 or 4 kids in it? And then where do those kids go? Because you couldn't have a classroom of 3 or 4 kids. They would have to be moved. So just there's some domino-like effects of those movement where we're going to ask families to commit for an entire semester regardless of selection of the virtual program or the responsive learning plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katina. And Katina, just tell me when to press the slide. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
You are ready to move on. So I wanted to, John asked me to take an opportunity to share, and I'm going to share a bit about some of the collaboration between Special School District and Webster Groves School District.
Hey, Katina, can you just introduce yourself first, please? I think probably some people aren't familiar with you, so apologies for that.
I appreciate that. I'm Katina Lyles. I'm the Director of Special Education for the Webster Groves School District. As I was saying that John asked if I could share some information that would help provide some level of understanding around what special education services may look like in the district if we were to be in a virtual environment. So I have a few slides to share some information. At the very beginning, it's important to just note that myself as the Director of Special Education and the Special Education administrators who are the area coordinators in the district have collaborated directly with Webster Groves School District on planning since we started this in March. And that has included those weekly administrative meetings, collaboration around that Canvas platform, just consistent communication and meeting around problem solving so that we can work to proactively meet the needs of all of our students, staff, and families. And then review of those surveys, some of that information that John shared and survey information we have as well. Advance. So on the Webster Groves School District Return to School webpage, there is a how students with IEPs will receive support. In a case where we would potentially be moving to all virtual, I would want to be sure that we continue to update that information so that staff and community have access to what it is we're doing and how we're partnering together. The SSD Webster Groves staff will participate and follow the procedures, protocols, and training along with Webster Groves School District staff, so that wouldn't be different. We have also been working together to ensure that we have necessary PPE or that protective gear as far as masks are concerned, things of that nature that teachers and staff would need if we were inside of the school environment, and collaborating together around this responsive learning plan that you have heard so much about. Next slide. So student needs, these are some of the ways that we would meet student needs through collaborating with staff and families. Myself as the Director of Special Education would be, this is daily, and we've been doing this definitely since March, supporting the district administration, staff, students, and families. Area coordinators who are our special education administrators would be available and have been available on a daily basis for staff, students, and families to help support and problem solve day to day. They also spend time on the Zoom classroom sites, for example, with staff, and would continue to do that. The teachers, special education teachers and case managers, they would be the primary go-to as far as coordinating the services and supports for students with IEPs. They would be the ones as case managers responsible for developing what we have as distance learning plans. And so whether a student is in a hybrid model or a virtual model, a student with an IEP would have a distance learning plan. And in that, teachers would provide independent learning activities and live virtual instruction based on the master and classroom schedules that you saw Dr. Adams presenting earlier. We also have related service providers who support student needs, who are like our speech language pathologists or occupational therapists, for example, and they would be working directly with case managers to also provide those necessary related services, instructions, and supports for students with IEPs. And this does include those virtual learning sessions as well, whether hybrid or fully virtual. And those sessions could very well be small group or one-on-one with family permissions that we have accessed previously. And we also have paraprofessionals. Our paras are integral to the work that we do, and they would also support instruction, given that direction from teachers as well as the administrators. And they have done things in the past and would continue to do the same activities as far as preparing materials or data collection and supporting in live and small group sessions. Next slide. So a distance learning plan, if you ask what is a distance learning plan, it includes lessons, activities, and proposed schedules for services that a student would get as a part of their IEP or individual education plan. The distance learning plans do communicate the needs of each student and how those needs would be addressed. SSD staff return to work on August 12th, and they will begin as soon as they possibly can, collaborating with parents to develop those updated distance learning plans. Students with IEPs have distance learning plans from the spring as well, but we will be looking to update those this fall. And so distance learning would include live virtual instruction as well as lessons and learning activities, support, and consultation from case managers and service providers. The actual case managers are the ones who are responsible for completing those distance learning plans, and they consult with families. They'll also consult with our surrogates, other special education teachers, related service providers, general education staff as well. Those plans would be updated every 2 weeks. They would be reviewed by the case manager in consultation with service providers and our parents and guardians in order to determine if there need be any changes or if the plan as it is should move forward. Next slide. So there are, I linked some of the resources that kind of outlines what Webster Groves is doing as a school district, as well as accommodating the needs of students who live who receive their education in alternative settings. And then we also have some of the same resources for a special school district. What's not in here, though, I would like to mention, there were a couple of questions in relation to our students who access our on-site or our off-site work program, which is CBVI, or Community-Based Vocational Instruction Program. And so we did anticipate that there may be a delay in being able to start or either may not if we go virtual. So our SSD transition department has developed curriculum and resources for teachers to access. Those resources provide job skills training, whether it be physically in the high school or if it be virtually. So students who are accessing CBVI would also be able to access those specific types of lessons through the distance learning planning process as well. Are there any specific questions that I can answer that may not have been covered?
Thank you, Katina. And I do just want to acknowledge Katina again. She does great work for our district. And just to I'm always amazed that she also does the same role for the Ladue and Lindbergh school district. So it's a really big, hard job, and I appreciate your support.
Absolutely.
So, John, I saw a couple of board members come off mute. So I'm just wondering, Keita or Amy, did you have any specific questions you wanted to ask related to special school district?
I did.
Please go ahead.
First of all, thanks, Katina, for being here sort of remotely and sharing this information with us. I know it's reassuring to the board members, but also to those of us who are parents. And my follow-up of special education students, my follow-up question is, as a parent, and I just want to, I think that I heard you say that if there are related services that need to be provided in person, there is the possibility of doing that.
Yes, there is a possibility of doing that if there is access to the school. Yes.
Okay. And John, are we going to provide access for students to receive related services in our buildings?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
That was my exact question.
So, John, are you going to go into that in some more detail later on? Is that something you want to address, how that would work now? Or what I'm conscious you've got things you want to share with us, and I don't want to, I'd like you to get through your presentation before we hit all the questions.
I mean, for that topic, I think one of the things is, you know, while we are in virtual setting, if we have the ability, if there are situations where we can, you know, find safe ways to bring kids in to support them somehow, we want to try and do that as best we can. I will say, in talking with Dr. Keenan, superintendent for SSD, she had shared with me just what Katina shared the other day, and that if it is a related service and we are in a virtual format, that they would provide the opportunity for a student to come to the school to get that particular service. And as Katina did, ensuring that the special ed staff responsible for that, and obviously Webster Groves School District staff would be in the building, would have all the necessary PPE depending on what was needed. At minimum, masks, but you know, as Dr. Keenan said, the full extent, whatever is needed to provide that service.
It is also important to note that if we were in a situation where we were unable to access the school, so if we were in a shutdown, for example, then we would move those related services to the distance learning planning process as we did before. Or if a parent does not want to have their child come into the school building, then we would be accessing those services through the distance learning planning process.
And so, John, I know we've got a Q&A planned for parents for the various, as you described, sort of groups of grade levels. Will there be an opportunity for parents to also for a Q&A for parents of students with who are receiving SSD services to ask questions as well?
I have not planned that. I don't know if Katina, you all have, but we could certainly talk about the possibility.
Absolutely,
Katina.
I'd be amenable to that. I have done that in other districts as well.
Yeah,
I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. All right.
Good idea.
Why don't you keep going with this? I'm mindful. I want to make sure that we get to board members' questions before we're done here. All right.
Okay. Pam, do you want to talk about the lunch program?
I can't hear you.
Pam, we can't hear you. You may have to go to a different computer.
No.
No.
Poor Pam, I feel like this always happens.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question of Katina while we wait?
Sure.
She had mentioned that they're that they go back to work on August 12th, and I'm curious, can parents
communicate with their case managers now, or do they wait until that August 12th date? And should they expect to be hearing?
Great question. So at this time, staff may or may not be checking their email. I would recommend if a parent has a question, and our contact information is on the website as well, that they would reach out directly to the area coordinator for that school and or myself. And so I can be sure that maybe there might be a way to more prominently display our information so that it's easily accessible, but that would be the best way to get an immediate response.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Pam?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Don't touch a thing.
Get the screen moved, it's on my other monitor. Okay. So meals for our students, it will look a little bit different than what we did in the spring. The waiver that we had for the spring said that we could feed all students up to 18 years old in the district. That will not be the case this fall. We will be able to serve district students, but the fees will be based on the student's free, reduced, or their full pay status. So if you're full pay status, you will have to pay for that meal. We're still working to determine what locations we're going to use. We can set it up at various schools, so we'll work through that and communicate that in the next couple of weeks. There will be an alternate hot and cold options on a daily basis. Then the menu options of one entree offered daily so there'll be one entree offered daily with the option for a vegetarian meal also. So all of the components of the meal will meet the requirements for the National School Lunch Program. So that's a little bit different than what we did when we closed and went virtual in the spring. So for technology, we'll use the survey information to determine who needs a device to learn at home for their virtual learning. The devices will be brought from the various school buildings to the service center. And at the service center, they're going to be disinfected, checked to make sure they're ready to go, ready for the students to use them. They'll be barcoding them for inventory purposes, and then they will create a schedule for families to be able to pick up those devices prior to the first day of school. We plan on doing that the week before school starts, and we will continue providing technology support for families who need it during the the virtual learning component. Thank you.
Just a few things. Another one of the hot topics that came up was just related to attendance, and attendance is something mandatory, as we said before, that the state's requiring. They didn't require it in the springtime, but we'll have to take attendance in this virtual setting, which all of our students will be to start K-12. It will be based on their accessing Canvas. Because there's an asynchronous piece and there's a live piece, it's not something where they have to be there when it's live, but it'll all be based on us being able to monitor their engagement in that Canvas program. If we go to the hybrid or the in-person, which we hope to do, it'll be based on the days that we're actually physically in one another's company. And I give the example there, if we're in a hybrid model and kids are there 2 days a week and a student is absent one of those days, that student's attendance for the week will be 50%. And I don't know how that looks across a 5-day, if they are given how DESE's doing that. Is it 2.5 days that they're there? I don't know how the actual algorithm works, but that's how it's been simply articulated to us. A big thing that I feel is essential as we talk about equity and access is, again, how do we demonstrate care for people and what are the needs? So how do we know what the needs are? By listening to people, by seeing what they respond, and then how do we respond to them? Some of the things that we are thinking of right now, this coming week, I have a meeting with some of the foundation leadership and Pam to discuss a joint community fundraiser of the foundation, of the Alumni Association, and then PTOs. We haven't brought everybody to the table yet, but talking about how can we raise money and resources for students and families in need. I put community and staff right there. Also, the technology for teachers. One of the things that we want to be able to do is in a virtual environment, which likely could be, good practice to continue to help our students learning in virtual environments, which a number of them have been. But what technology could we use that could up the game and the quality of service to our families? What technology might we buy, such as the swivel technology, things that teachers wear, in a camera system where they can walk around the room, be recorded, be streamed, and such like that. I did want to talk to, based on the access piece and the community outreach. One of the needs is articulated in the data that our community has, and I think a whole lot about is that childcare piece, the impact of kids not being in school on families. So how might we as a community, and I know people are already thinking in their own spaces of how they could do that. I've heard a lot of different examples, been given a lot of articles, but how might we as a community support our families who don't have that access or don't have that network with that important childcare during the day? And that's both of our district students and as well as our staff and families. So how might we be able to do that? So I'll be working with, again, the foundation, some of those groups, and then reaching back out to some community partners on that. Changes in the return to school plan based on what we have, our community sessions, our sessions with staff, the plan that we sent out that we will edit. One is when we are in person, we are going to require the mask. We said for all staff, but for all students as well. How this looks at a very young age, having a 2-year-old as well as a 5-year-old preschool, it's going to be, the preschool would be a place of like learning, of experimenting, of wanting to set that expectation that it's worn, but also honoring the developmental nature of children being that age. So how can we as an educational institution support the families in that, and then support the kids with that as well, and just kind of build on that from the beginning. I mentioned that some of our course offerings in our original plan, we thought that our course offerings would only be limited in the high school if you selected the Webster Goes Virtual program. But as Jason articulated, 6th and 7th and 8th would also be impacted as well. And then I articulated earlier about the commitment of a semester to whatever plan you select. Just a timeline. I know one of the things that, and again, we're pressed just like everybody else, but I would say it's one of the things that limits our ability to breathe sometimes is just thinking that our staff's coming back 2 weeks from today, back to start with professional development and ramping up for our work with schools. But we have a pretty aggressive timeline. One, on July 29th, which is today, we are going to send out an enrollment form to families, which has them select, are you in the virtual program or the responsive learning plan? We had sent that original survey out to get an assessment of where we were. And Sandy and her team has already put that to good use in thinking through the number of changes that we might have to make, or groupings at grade levels, possible course offerings. But as we articulated to community members last week, we know that absent some of the information that was shared today, what's the virtual experience going to be like, whichever program I'm in, what decision is going to be made with the responsive learning plan, people might have a difference of opinion. So what we'll do today is we're going to push out that form to families. We're going to ask for an aggressive timeline of August 2nd, which is Sunday, to return that form. We know that we may have to reach out to some families personally or by phone call to do that. But we have to really next week spend the bulk of our time finalizing class lists and staffing. It's a huge, huge, huge undertaking for our building level leaders, for our staff here, for HR, for Jason, to put those classes and those levels together. As we articulated at the Zoom, and I'll say it again, at those Zoom sessions, if you walked out the door of your elementary school, for example, or you received something from Steger saying, these are going to be my teachers, that it's possible, it's going to happen that those teachers and those teams are going to change. And that's because we have to have teachers in the virtual environment. And so that the possibility that's going to change. So again, just an awareness of that. Next week, I already shared with you the different Q&A sessions that we're going to host. August 12th is the date our staff return. That time will be focused on, again, the development for them and the time to plan. The week of August 17th is the tentative time where we're going to make sure the technology gets distributed to families. The 24th is the first day of school. We plan to engage our stakeholders, students where appropriate, but staff and families in the first, at week 2, at week 4 of our plan, just a really quick survey of how things are going so that we know where we're doing well or where we need to improve based on that stakeholder feedback. And then the plan right now is after that week 4 survey to do that every 10 weeks. And then, as I articulated earlier, on October 9th, presenting
John,
to the board.
you meant every 6 weeks, didn't you?
I've met every 6 weeks. I apologize.
Thanks.
On October 9th, presenting to the board what our recommendation is based on data science, as well as, well, I'll say data and science, what our recommendation is for the responsive learning plan, what format to be in for the rest of the semester up until winter break. So speaking to that real quick, that continues to be a topic. Today, we talked about it for about an hour as superintendents. And again, here we are as leaders, and we're trained in education and a lot of different people, a lot of different careers in the business, none experts in epidemiology, disease, infectious disease, or anything. We have had the access to a lot of people who have supported with this, and we're going to look to access those same people to help us come up with the metrics to know from a community transmission standpoint and other things related to transmission, such as testing and the such. What's the data that we can look at to know as a community where we're good to shift from the in-person or from the remote to the hybrid or the virtual learning? What I shared with you, and I just have 2 quick examples that were shared with superintendents last week. This is an example of the CDC's return to work plan. And this just gives some examples of data that you can look at from going to different phases. So for example, the first criteria, decreases in newly identified COVID cases, looking for that downward trend to continue, and looking at across particular periods of time. It also talks about, at the bottom, robust testing program. And you could see at the bottom, when you're looking at test results coming back in less than 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, in St. Louis County right now, we're not close to that. And I think the, city council, or not the city council, but county council has talked about that. So our testing program definitely has to get much better, because if we have a staff member that's tested or a student who goes out again and they can't return, that's the impact on, if it's an elementary room of 20 kids. For right now, I know of somebody who's 2 weeks out on a test result, to possibly 100 kids in a high school room. And it just can't be like that. Here's an example. It's not a school district example, but it's an example from a county in Nebraska. And it's really, they have this for all the counties in Nebraska. And again, it's looking at some of the different factors that go into an algorithm that place you on a particular, risk dial, so to speak, with coming back to school. Looking at testing, positivity rate, hospitalizations, patients on ventilators, and all of those kind of things. And here is something that, again, I give some of those examples that we will, working as regional school districts, look to land on, look to be consistent. There are some inconsistencies. Had the opportunity, shout out to the Kirkwood School District, that yesterday invited me to be on a call with some medical professionals, infectious disease people, and then they had somebody who is does this work and has a website called COVID Act Now. And we were talking about some of the different criteria. And one of the things, she stressed a number of things, but just the importance of triangulating data when we make this decision, and also understanding that that maybe data can be high in one area. If it's high in one area, it might just the importance of not making it kind of fit into an algorithm, so to speak. Triangulating, making it look like an algorithm. We also have, which is going to be really big, in addition to that community data, is we have to determine our local data, and we'll have the opportunity to do that easier with staff. But number of people who are in quarantine, number of people who are cases who get the virus, and then in terms of that symptomatic piece. The benefit certainly of being in a virtual remote setting is that somebody that's symptomatic could continue easily from home if they're not in the school setting. So, all right, we've reached the end. Open to all your.
Okay, so John, thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation that you've put together there. Appreciate that you've touched on a number of the questions that the board had sent to you in advance of this. Especially appreciated what Jason had put together in terms of the class schedules. I think let's just, I'm sure that all the board members have got questions, so perhaps if we just sort of will go around the horn and just let everybody sort of have a chance to sort of get sort of a question in, and we'll move sort of from there. So Joe, why don't you start? Do you have any specific question you'd like to ask?
Go to somebody else first. I'm going to think about that for a minute.
Okay, Keita.
He answered about the schedules and about special school, but I did have another question regarding technology. I had a couple people come to me, and their concern was that they didn't know, how are we reaching out to people to let them know when and where to pick up technology if they need it? Like if they need, one particular person I'm thinking of had more than one student in her home. So are we able to provide more than one phone book or whatever we're providing? And how do we know, what's an easy way for them to let people know where they can it be texted? I mean, everybody gets a text message. Not everybody gets an email. So I guess that's kind of my concern.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that. We will definitely be communicating that with families in a few different modalities. We will put out information in the voice blast, because we do know that some people don't check email, don't check it regularly, but kind of communicating kind of pickup times. And if there are needs, just like in the fall or the spring where we had to deliver the tech to the houses, we did that. We did, based on learning through last year, our original survey last year just asked if a computer was needed, but we didn't know, was that 2 computers? Was that 3 computers? And so our survey this time around, knowing everybody didn't complete it, we did ask people, do you need one for each student? So based on the data that we receive, based on what we feel about our technology, our computers, that we could provide everybody who has a need for a computer, the computer. So we'll send something out in written form. We'll send something out in terms of a blast, and we'll have principals include that in correspondence from the schools too. We will, I think what we will do is, and I just wanted to throw this out, is we are not a one-to-one school district at this point. We've talked a whole lot about that over the past 6 months. The cost to get there would be too great at this point. So families that do have a device that they can provide their children, we would ask that you let them use that computer, just so we can make sure we're getting the best, the newest devices in the hands of the children where the need exists.
And then my last, just quick question. I know you mentioned reaching out to the community and PTOs and thus and such for help. Would that also go towards meals? Like if there a way to maybe have some fundraising or something towards meals?
Yes. So you're asking, I'm sorry, I missed the first part. Yes. In terms of, fundraising for food, absolutely. And that's something that we've talked about. The idea being that if we're going to have, depending on if we have one location for food pickup or another location, how can that be a space where anybody can come and access some of those different items or supports? One thing we talked in relation to special education, one of the things that St. Louis Public, I know that they released that they're doing, is they're creating such centers, but at those centers, they're also looking to provide tutoring for families and kids in need, maintaining all the proper guidelines and distancing and stuff. It would be scheduled. It wouldn't be a walk through the door. So there are a lot of possibilities, but we have thought about extra food too.
That would be awesome. Okay.
We will be doing that.
Christine. Oh, sorry.
Can I add real quick to that one thing? Based on a virtual environment, we're going to have the opportunity to repurpose some staffing groups because their work is, directly tied to children being in the building. So when we think of something like that, where it's a community store that's attached to the food program, or some of that tutoring type support, we have some staff that might be able to own that and really help lead those efforts. So we're excited about that possibility.
So
sorry.
Just for clarification, are you like kind of referring to maybe some of the aids and things of that nature, or were you thinking about somebody else?
Well, we have to think about, I think we have different staffing groups, so we have to make some decisions. And can we, repurpose our staff as best we can? The other side of that is we do have to have the responsibility to consider, are there any people that we would have to furlough as a result of this? That's a necessary conversation that we are having. But in terms of the aids, I know Dr. Wiley is thinking that aids, how can we use aids for instructional purposes? Some aids. If we're in a face-to-face environment, we're thinking of how can our aids, if we have a teacher that needs to quarantine or isolate or are symptomatic, those aides could hop into that spot, know the kids, that kind of thing. So we have to look at all of our people and make those determinations. Sandy, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just to say that the staffing piece is the one piece that's still definitively up in the air. And we are currently, we have some current preliminary information based upon what we received from the surveys a week or so ago. And we'll update that shortly thereafter the Sunday, because of course where the children are is where the adults have to be, right? So I have to figure out from a parent perspective what they would need first, and then we will effectively assign staff from there. So I can't say definitively, I'm not sure what staffing groups will do what. We've not really made that determinate. And then of course, we haven't even really communicated with staffing groups yet, right? So I think from this vantage point, we'll do the best we can, kind of considering where we are and what we have. And I should have more to share with you guys by the early next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christine.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I will look forward to hearing that, because I'm just trying to square the difference between almost half of our teachers wanting or needing to teach virtually and only 35% of our students choosing that virtual option previously. Now that some things have changed and more some people might choose that.
So we had the survey we submitted to teachers. There was one question and it asked them directly, would you be choosing the virtual option based upon a need, right? And that need could be medical or childcare. The other group was, this is just something that you would prefer. And so that 50+% is comprised of all of them, right? But once you tease out and you really consider the people who would need to, you're medically fragile, or people who with COVID, which makes staffing so difficult, because with COVID, there are new federal guidelines and regulations that could make a staff who generally is perfectly healthy and able to work, but now because of what COVID presents, now they're not, right? And so it's those staff members that we will focus in on, and I would definitively say that it's not 50% of the staff, that 50% is based on that medical need and childcare, again, as well as preference. So that's the hard part, right? Because you could have 5 teachers at Clark, I'm just saying Clark randomly, 5 teachers at Clark, 2 in kindergarten that would like to teach virtually, but then you have 0 kindergarten families potentially at Clark that want virtual, right? So what do you do with that, right? And so that's why it's so complicated and complex, and it's going to take some digging into and a lot of one-on-one conversations with people and then with groups so that people can understand. But the primary point that I would like for everybody to understand is that school as we knew it in March of 2020 is not going to be school in August of 2020. Even if we, in 9 weeks, come back, right? It's still not going to be normal school. There is a new normal that we have not yet established because we haven't been back in school. So we don't know what that new normal is. So I agree with you. We've teased the numbers apart. So on the back end, we can kind of see things and it looks a little bit better. But we are trying to figure that through. So I'm anxiously anticipating if any of our parents will change their minds, right? And see if any of the staffing needs will change, right? And so, yeah, that's the work right now, figuring that out.
Thank you, Sandy. I think what I can understand and what you're saying is that it's a complex situation, it's dynamic, and it continues to change, and it will continue to change even before the semester starts. And I really want our community to understand everything that you've been doing and will be doing to make this all work. And it's a lot. It is a lot, because actually some people, even since filling out the survey, have emailed and said, I'm sorry, Sandy, I put this, but I thought about it and I want to change it to this. So even those numbers are not solidified because we've had some changes since then. So thank you for that, Christine. Sure. So I just have one other question, and it is related to this. Then it looked to me like you had a response rate of families of about 3,000, and I think we have around 4,000 students in the district. And so I'm guessing that's about a 75% response rate based on that information. And now that you're asking for this information to be turned around quickly again to make your final choice by August 2nd, how will you ensure that every family gets this correspondence and the information? Because I think I read online or on Facebook or something that some people were having problems. Maybe they didn't get that email, or they weren't sure where to look for that email. They might not have signed in to get emails from the district. How will you, and I heard you say you'll have to reach out to some people, but I think 1,000 students to have to reach out to, or 1,000 families might get a little bit difficult.
I'll speak to that because that's more me. Our numbers are actually, so there's some people who filled out the survey 5 times because they didn't know if it's submitted or they changed their mind. But and there was an occasion where one parent or caregiver did it and another person in the same house did it. But our numbers, we got as close as, I want to say, and Tim could probably say this better than I can, I think maybe down to 300 students that weren't accounted for. Because again, that one response is like the parent caregiver submission. So there are multiple students behind that. Okay. So we got pretty good data. But I think we're going to, again, written communication, blasting something out to people. And then, our kind of thinking is we have to have the schools to support us in reaching out to people who we haven't heard from, because you're right. And I thank you for honoring it. The complexity of trying to place children and create classes and trying like crazy to support all of our high school students with what they want to do. And then being mindful of our staff and providing them with high level care, and the ones that may have an accommodation that's medical related, a preference possibly. It's not easy, and our goal is to try and accomplish it in 5 days. And so that's why the quick turnaround time. Sandy has done a great job kind of starting down that path already with what preliminary people selected. So we feel like we have a good idea. But to her point, we have received a number of people who have said, I'd like to change. And by number of people, I'll say 25. So not a huge number, but we do know that a lot of people wanted to see what's the schedule going to look like? What's the virtual going to look like? What are going to be the offerings? And so this data will be a lot more concrete.
And Christine,
thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. A large part of that data dig as well is because we have individual families' names. We are literally making lists, right? So, and then you can compare that. So if 1,000, but that's 1,000 families over, 8 schools, 9 schools. And so you've got all these different schools. And so at Clark, it could be 25, right? And so then you would say, oh, that's 2 kids per grade level or whatever the case may be. And so with that, is that really going to make or break one staff person? Probably not. So like that's really digging into the weeds of it. So that'll be the work that we do. And if we have too much of a discrepancy, then of course the phone calls to follow up to see. But we won't leave that huge of a gap when making that staffing decision. We can't do that. It's too risky.
Okay, thank you. Amy.
I'm good for now. I'll pop in if I have something.
Okay.
Thanks,
thank you. Alex?
Yeah, so I have 2 questions actually. So the first one, will students or their families be able to choose the location of the lunch breakfast pickup? You said there are going to be multiple places, but if they're virtual, for example, if they live in North Webster, they're supposed to attend Edgar Road, are they going to be able to choose where to pick that lunch up?
Pam, can you take that?
Yeah, and Nancy's on here too, our director with Chartwells, but we're still working through that. We're hoping that they can pick the location. Obviously, if we're not going to serve meals at every school, then we will obviously have choices, but we are hoping that is what we're going to do. We still have to confirm some of these details with DESE since this is new to us. So we're hoping we're going to be able to do that, but I can't say that for sure right now.
Okay.
Go ahead, ask your second question. Everybody else has been asking too.
And then the other one that I think you mentioned it, but I just want to clarify. So you mentioned the potential for furloughing. Just wanted to get a clear timetable on that. Did you say we're gonna know that and then let the staff know that early next week?
No, I think we're still processing. I mean, I think it's something that we have a responsibility to consider with taxpayer money. But our legitimate goal, and again, it's going to require a regional effort, is to be in person with kids in 9 weeks. And if that's the case, we're going to need people. We're going to need everybody, all hands on deck. So I think it won't necessarily be next week that we bring to you, but I think we do have to think about how are we repurposing staff, and are there any possibilities for furloughing, and that's something that we will, I believe, is a responsibility of ours to consider. But again, we're so new to this virtual environment, and that we've talked as a board before about just the importance of connections, and in a virtual environment, could some of our people be repurposed to be like those connections with kids, with families, checking in on them? I think we're continuing to be creative. The team has been amazing, and we'll keep thinking about how to do that to meet the needs of our kids and families.
And just to clarify, so by the beginning of next week, we will have the data from the families, all of that hopefully disaggregated in a chart, and then where our staffing kind of falls with that. So we can hopefully have a complete picture of what families are falling in what category and what staffing we'll need per category. And then if we need to, and then we'll make some decisions after that. So I don't know what that time frame is, but we should have at least a knowing of where we're falling right now with regard to virtual year-long versus district virtual. We should have that by the beginning of next week.
Thank you. Alan.
All right, so my first question is technology related, and particularly thinking about devices and the technology that they're going to have to use. So in the effort to try to get parents to use devices that they have, the technology we're going to be using like Canvas and Launch, are those programs all iPad compatible? Because I know I heard from parents that particularly the Launch program had some trouble with Flash and being iPad compatible. I'm thinking about some of our younger learners and elementary students that might just have iPads available to them. What's the compatibility there?
I don't personally know. Tim, Jason, Pam, anybody else know that?
I do not know that answer.
I'll jump on there. So there are going to be some what we would call glitches with Flash, and with that system in Canvas. It's more recommended that kids use a computer or a PC to interact. I know that's something on Canvas's end that they're also hearing about, so they'll be working on those solutions as well. But it's more Chromebook, PC, Mac compatible with computers.
Thanks for that question.
Okay.
You want one more?
Sure, I can do another one too. In thinking about the sort of returning in this virtual environment, will our teachers also be virtual at their house, or will they be in the buildings?
We are still yet to completely land on that one. My thinking has been to have our staff in our buildings. I keep going back to a moment I had with my wife last year, who was a first and second and fourth grade teacher, with our 1 and 4-year-old running around the house at 9 a.m. and her just saying, could you imagine if I had to teach in this moment? Can you imagine if I had to teach right now? And I'm like, no, and that, again, that was some of that heroic work that our staff did last year. And so if we're going to be live and synchronous with kids on a schedule, it's really hard to do that with a 2-year-old or with a 4-year-old running around the house. So that's where I would really like to. I haven't landed because I respect where people are in this struggle with families. I know that we have community members that are also having to find their own, childcare situations too. So it's not something unique to our teachers. I've been exploring how to provide support for our staff. And so I've been looking into that with the county. I've looked into that with attorneys. And so I'm hoping to be able to offer that, but we haven't completely landed on it.
Okay. Joe, do you have any questions now?
I do. So I guess as a follow-up to Alan's question, so would they do the professional development before school starts for teachers? Is that in person? Is that virtual? Do we know that?
Jason's jumping on.
Sure. So we are planning for all of our staff development to be, whether it's related to virtual teaching or whether it's the anti-bias work, all of that will be done virtually.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead. Have you got another one? Sorry.
Sorry. And then as far as materials go, is there going to be a way for students to get textbooks or library books or, I don't know, all the materials they would normally have? So they're not just on screens?
Yeah, that's something that type of information is something that we still have to figure out how we make that happen. Originally when we were thinking about this, we were thinking about a scheduled time that was regular each week for, especially at the younger levels, that ongoing connection. And then we started talking about the equity issues as it relates to that, knowing that some of our children might be in daycares or might with different people during the week, and they wouldn't have that regular access. So it's a priority. Definitely in terms of the start of the year, how to figure out how to get those materials, but then how to create, what's the possibilities to create those touch points throughout the year. Yeah. So that's something that we just haven't finalized.
Okay. And hopefully at some point we can have some kind of resource list on the website for people as far as places they can go for extra help or people to call or ways to reach out for assistance and support.
For the academic side, we have some of the utilities and food and all that kind of stuff, but what were you thinking?
I don't know, like I'm just thinking as time goes on, that some of our local, like Webster Rock Hill Ministries that normally does tutoring, I would guess that they're gonna try and provide some kind of services. I just think as these announcements come out, there's probably gonna be people in the community or organizations that start to come out to support that, maybe some of the local churches, I don't know.
Yeah.
And just, I guess, in terms of just general support so that it's easy for people that are struggling to call and say, hey, I need help with whatever.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that could be, a position that a person or a small group holds to be that resource center, because right now people will contact us or they'll email us or their FAQ or all these different things. And that would be a great for our, some different groups. Thank you.
Okay, so what I want to do now, I'm conscious, I don't know if you need a formal motion from the board, but what I'd suggest is that next step, presuming everybody's on board, that we have a recommendation or put forward a motion to accept the opening plan as proposed by the districts. And if we do that as a board, and if we sort of do that next, if everyone's comfortable, then we can carry on with the Q&A. I just don't want to, I don't want to get sort of the approval of the opening plan sort of lost in the mix here. So does that work for everybody? Okay, hearing no objections, in which case I'll entertain a motion to approve the opening plan as outlined by Dr. Simpson today.
I'm sorry, I just have to ask, are we voting on the reopening plan?
Yes. Yes, we're voting to approve the reopening plan as proposed by Dr. Simpson. If that's all right.
Make a motion to approve the reopening plan proposed by Dr. Simpson.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, before we go to a vote, is there any, so I will have a given opportunity for Q&A afterwards, but we're not done with Q&A at all. I just want to make sure we get this out of the way. Is there any discussion prior to taking a vote? Christine, do you have any questions prior to taking a vote?
I have asked my questions, thank you.
Okay, no, and so you're going to, okay, in which case, Amy, go ahead.
So we haven't discussed Walter Ambrose Family Center. So you're asking us to approve the proposal for K through 12 only.
Through K through 12 only, that's correct. Yes, and I am mindful that we do still have to talk about Ambrose, or we do need to talk about Ambrose as well. So yeah, but this is strictly K through 12.
Okay.
If there are no more questions, then can I have all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, good. All right, so that's more just there. So I'm happy to go in either direction. John, I don't know how long you need to talk about Ambrose. I don't know how many other questions board members have about the K through 12 and just more the mechanics as to how that's going to work. One thing, by the way, I would like, if you can arrange for those tentative schedules to be posted on the website, I think, and anything else from the slide presentation you think would be helpful, but particularly those class schedules, I think that would be very helpful to parents. Let's go around once more, just if anyone's got any questions about the K through 12 that they want to get, and then when we've done that, we'll move on to Ambrose. Does that work for everybody? Or I'm going to assume it does. So again, I'll just go in the same order as I did before. So Keita, do you have any more questions about K through 12? Okay, Christine?
No, I have a question, but I don't know that, John, you can answer it. But I was wondering if you had any insight, given that we don't yet know where teachers will be teaching from, what did Sam Page mean when he said that he's working with others to provide spaces to quarantine teachers because they'll be on the front lines?
They are providing, they have at least one hotel now, and they didn't know if more hotels would be coming, but it would be a place where a teacher could go to quarantine. And that's kind of the response that I got. Yeah.
Thank you.
The occupancy, the 25% occupancy doesn't apply to schools or childcare centers
Okay,
also.
thank you.
Yep.
Amy? Oh, go. All right, go ahead, Keita.
Just one clarifying question. Somebody texted me, so just to make sure. So if the teachers are in the building, they will be in their own individual classrooms. Is that
Correct.
okay? So they're not have to worry about social distancing because they're going to be in the classrooms basically by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like in central office here, all of our staff has been back. I mean, some of us have been back for a while. All staff came back July 6th. And so we kind of have different protocols in place for coming in. And then I don't have my mask because I'm in my office, but if Jason comes next door, or I go next door, anytime I walk out the door or we're in company of one another, masks are worn. So we will gather in our boardroom for hours. And we're always masked up, making sure we're apart from one another. But all the safety protocols that we've talked about, like, would be in place in schools, and staff will for sure, because a lot of staff want to be back in their rooms and feel they're much better in their spaces with their materials, with a better broadband internet system than they have at home. So that they'll for sure have access.
Will they have will they have a choice if they don't want to be in like group meetings? Are they planning to do that? They have I don't know, how would that be accommodated?
I probably wouldn't say they wouldn't have it. They probably wouldn't have a choice. Again, we'd follow all the health and safety protocols, and part of it is helping people to get in the right, to educate. And we see our responsibility. We don't see it as ours alone to educate community, including our staff, on COVID and transmission. Actually, we do our own staff and our kids, but not the broader community, I should say. But helping people to come back. In March, it was, all of us go home, all of us be safe. Not as much was known about the virus at the time. We're still learning about the virus, but feel that we can be in spaces as we are at central office and be safe. So that doesn't mean that we're going to bring all the teachers at Webster Groves High School together in a space for a staff meeting if we can do it Zoom. Like, if we can do it Zoom, let's just do it Zoom. So maybe with that teacher or a staff member, they're uncomfortable. Maybe we gradually work to get everybody outside sitting around a table or something like that. But yeah.
I was just clarifying. I know.
Yeah.
So for each grouping, before they return, we do a Zoom kind of training on it, which talks about those protocols. And one of those slides talks specifically about we are not necessarily promoting meeting in person, including visitors coming up to the school. And so, of course, they'll do their daily screener, but we're still highly encouraging those Zoom meetings, even if you're in the same building. So third grade could be Zooming their grade level team, right? I'm in my class, you're in your class. That's what I do here in HR. We have our HR meetings, but we Zoom them, and they're literally right next door. So that's a part of that training. That's one of our talking points, is that we still highly encourage meeting via Zoom. So it does give people the opportunity to still maintain, the safety of their space.
Okay. Amy. Okay. Joe. Alex. Alan.
All right, I don't have a question, but just have a suggestion. When thinking about those metrics for reopening and some of those phases that you brought up, Dr. Simpson, if you could include that either perhaps in the reopening plan edits or online with some of the other things, so the community can see those. I think they would really like to sort of see what you had put up there, because sometimes it's kind of hard to see on the Facebook Live.
I appreciate that. That was one of the things that we had talked about, just being real transparent with that and having that in like a prominent place on the website. So depending on when that data is updated, people can see it. And kind of the rule of thumb is looking for, does whatever. So it's not, this day we didn't have many transmissions, but like, what do like those 14-day rolling averages show? And again, kind of making our decision for that at that second quarter type thing. But thank you for that.
Yeah. That's all for me, David.
Thank you. And John, one of the things, just to sort of remind everybody, one of the things you said, you're going to have these Q&A sessions for the 3 different groups. Yeah. When are notifications for that going to go out?
We'll send something out. The plan is to send something out today. It may be tomorrow, but the goal is today, along with some of this information, to send that out.
And do you have a date for when those are going to be held?
Yeah, it was on my,
apologize, sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, I'll put it back up again. On my second slide, right there, see it?
I do. All right, so August the 4th, 5th, and 6th. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Excellent. And we've got the Zoom details there already. That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So I think let's do this then. Let's transition over to Ambrose, if that's all right with everybody. We can certainly come back again if people have other questions that occur. That will come back. But let's transition over to Ambrose now. So John, I don't know if I'll let you start that off.
Yeah, no, I've already kind of, I think, shared some of my take on it in terms of the education that you're provided there, the data and the research as it relates to our youngest children. Now, our adults there are all the same age. And then the staffing component, easier to do there. The uneasy, uncomfortable piece of this discussion is that, the staffing for the programs of the entire center, whether it's the preschool, whether it's the adventure club, whether it's the parents as teachers, is largely driven by the tuition, by the participants. So just in the spirit of transparency, I felt like I had to share that. There are a number of school districts that some have been operating for a few weeks to a month with early childhood, such as Lindbergh, such as Kirkwood, and it's been successful. But I know that some school districts are going to look to make the decision regarding early childhood based on what they're doing K through 12 too. So I feel like we have the ability, and again, kind of what a lot of the people we've spoken with, but I feel like our practices and protocols are pretty good to be in place in the setting, and especially at Ambrose with the low numbers, which right now, looking at a reduced class size limit, we would be looking at approximately 20% of the children that are typically there, and the different protocols and stuff in place. Feel like we'd be able to keep people, safe there, and but the struggle that we face everywhere is how people live their lives elsewhere, and so that's just a struggle in particular with adults. So,
okay.
So I just kind of wanted to see where people were with that, answer any questions you have related to that. Yeah, that's it.
So good. So I guess I'll just entertain. I know some board members had some very specific questions about Ambrose that I'd received in advance. So Alan, perhaps I'm going to go to you first, because I know you'd sent me a few questions, and then other board members, they just want to sort of give me a high sign if they're going to have questions about this as well. But Alan, I'll let you go first.
Sure. Thanks, David. John, can you just sort of explain for the community and maybe for other board members that might not be familiar, how, I assume you and Marty have talked, how you envision sort of the spacing and the smaller groups of children, how that would work? Are you talking about taking over, other spaces in the building and dividing up classes, or sort of how would we accomplish that social distancing in the buildings, number one? And number two, you referenced just a minute ago a 20% number. Is that something we would limit enrollment to 20% of capacity? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's my understanding that she had cut off at enrollment at some part last year. And so it was the people that were enrolled. And based on that, it would look like at the 3rd through 5th grade, approximately 80% of what a full class typically would look like. The 2-year-old program would still have 13 kids in a class. It would feature 3 adults. And that's kind of an extra adult for the purpose of grouping kids as best you can. I will say, and Marty would say too, that based on the developmental nature of kids, it will be impossible to socially distance kids to the extent that they are able to design a cohorting experience. They will, in terms of, like a part of their day right now is frolicking, where kids will go to different classrooms and it's this beautiful thing and interact with one another. That won't be in place. You will look to, at lunchtime, be mindful of spacing. Kids are not going to be at mass, so you may have not everybody eating in the gymnasium there as they typically do, but possibly eating outside, ensuring kids are 6 feet apart from one another. So there is not going to be, I think, with preschool kids, although we're going to have like that mask, the mask and the social distancing, doing that as best we can. They're preschoolers, and so it's going to be hard to do. But to the extent we could keep kids cohort, that's what we're going to try and do. But within the classroom setting, unless we put up the physical barriers, it'll be a challenge, a real challenge.
Okay, any other questions related to Ambrose?
My question is about staffing. Is staffing willing to come back to Ambrose? I guess you would have enough for the 20.
I think that's a great question. I think they represent, they're one of our staff. So you have varying levels of comfort. You have varying levels of uneasiness. People that want to come back, they all want to be with kids. They all want to be with kids, but they're kind of, I would say, representative of our population of staff. I think that the piece that the added dynamic to it is, again, the nature of the self-supporting nature of the programs, which is a challenge. I would like, K-12 for us all to be back in, or a hybrid, October 23rd, so we're going to need staff. We're going to need the staff if that occurs. So I think that's the complicated piece is, again, the nature of the work and how it's supported, how it's funded. For some perspective, and Pam shared some data earlier, the staffing of the center is about $1.2 million for the preschool, for the staff that just work with the preschool. Adventure Club is comparable, and then the FACE program is much less, but still a 6-figure number. So it's just, yeah. But I feel I can understand, I could argue any position on it, I could,
Just
that's
to be clear on, I'm not sure I'm under, so just to be clear, are you saying that if the Ambrose Center does not open in person, then we will not retain the staff members, all of the staff members who work there? Is that what you're saying? Because it's a tuition-based deal?
I think that would have to be a decision that we would make of how would that look considering the programming, and then, just what are we committed to be able to do?
Is that a decision that we would be making now, or is it like if we decided they're going to be virtual as well through October 23rd? Mm-hmm. And then we'll reassess. Do we have that option? Or I guess if you could tell us a little bit more clearly what our options are in terms of.
I mean, I think that's an option. I think, the board, you make the determination on the budget, you approve the budget. based on the numbers of staffing, like I said, and again, I'm just going based on a quarter, thinking it's a quarter of the year, it could be a little bit different, but it would be $250,000 for preschool staff, $250,000 for Adventure Club staff, and it would be around $25,000 or $30,000 for Parents as Teachers, the FACE program, for up until October 23rd. So that's something that certainly could be on the table. So I guess where I'm wondering, like, programmatically, I guess, what are your thoughts related to the program aside from the money? And then and again, I'm still processing it myself, which is why I didn't come out to you with a clear-cut recommendation. I'd entertain any thoughts on the financial piece.
Did they do virtual over the summer or in the spring?
Mm-hmm. They did it in the spring. I don't believe the summer.
Okay, so they have some experience doing that.
Yeah.
And in terms of families, because it's a little bit different than enrolling your child for kindergarten through 12th grade, do we have a sense of how many people have signed up to go back starting in August? And is that contingent upon the format?
Yeah, I think it's pretty contingent on the in-person. There's maybe a few people I think that will sign up for the virtual, but given the role, it's the preschool, but some people also use it as the childcare. Mm-hmm. Based on the format. And in the spring, what we did is we made the decision to eat the cost. I don't know if that's the right way, but eat the costs. We made that decision. And so we paid everybody. And they did a great job, obviously, with my son in it. They worked hard to send something out every day and then connect via Zoom once a week. It's just different than a 3-hour or up to an 11-hour experience.
All right, and then I just have one more question, then I'll let somebody else go. But this is a particularly sensitive topic, given that 2 of our staff members, one former staff member at Ambrose, passed away in March. And I would very much like to hear from Marty and from the other staff in that building about how they feel about this decision. Mm-hmm. I would give their thoughts a lot of deference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, and Marty and I talked about that. And I think I really do feel like I represented well that there's uneasiness, there's anxiousness. She said there's been excitement with them coming in and setting up their classrooms, anticipating that they would be back. But again, that added element of the financial piece, that's a hard pill, Yeah. When you're talking about your livelihood. So I think that complicates things.
And Amy, just to sort of echo what John said, I don't want to put words in Marty's mouth, but I'm the liaison to Ambrose for the board, and I spoke with her yesterday about this, and she sort of just what John said, there's sort of, she thinks the majority of staff are excited about the potential of coming back, but there's definitely that representative sample, like across the rest of our staff, that are nervous, they have concerns, that sort of thing. She also, to what John said earlier, she said it was really cathartic as some of the teachers came back in to set up their rooms and get things organized, to sort of remember the staff that they had lost and sort of see pieces of them around the building, that was really cathartic for some of the staff, and that allowed them to sort of remember and have a little bit of, I don't want to say closure, but just sort of have that time to reflect and remember who they were and what they meant to the school and to the building and as their friends and colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Alan.
Other questions? Christine, were you looking to ask a question?
No, honestly, Amy asked it. Thank you.
So let me ask sort of perhaps a slightly harder question, which is, so Ambrose, we provide the buildings, but beyond that, it's supposed to be self-supporting. If we as a district decide we're going to go and fund it beyond providing the building, and so, beyond what level it is self-supporting, we're doing that for a very small portion of the overall schools. And I'm sure that there are a lot of parents who don't have children enrolled in Ambrose, who are looking and saying, you know, my pre-K has gone away, and I can't get that. And Ambrose is, I mean, it needs to be closed to, you know, just in terms of the numbers that you've got. Do we have any issues in terms of providing district money for what's a sort of a, you know, we acknowledged as a board the importance of preschool education, and I'm certainly very supportive of that. But at the same time, do we have an issue if we're providing financial support beyond the use of the buildings for that population?
Are you asking me, or are you asking?
I'm asking you, I guess. Really, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think for me, no, I don't. We support the, you know, there's the building, there's the nurse, there's the custodians, there's the director of the overall program. So we are financially definitely committed to supporting that programming. And that's one thing I remember, at least my first year of administration, really trying to own it, albeit realizing that we're still going to need to rely on the tuition side from a financial standpoint to sustain it, you know, especially since it's a choice-based program. You know, we've got Head Start spots there that we get funding for. We now get some money through ADA for the state for some additional spots, but it's not a community-based preschool. So so yes, owning it, but realizing we can't support a community-based preschool financially at this point, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I have another question, John, or maybe Sandy can speak to this too. With some of the staff at Ambrose, if we make the decision to, you know, fund the staff and they do some sort of virtual programming or whatever in these interim 8 weeks, is there a way some of those certified staff and the staff at Ambrose can plug into some of the other pieces with some of the K-2 initiatives and things? Like, can they use some of their skills to help plug gaps and support our younger elementary students?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that would preclude us from doing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so my follow-up question then, upon hearing about Head Start and then thinking about SSD, could we know more about what the cost and benefit would be of opening up Ambrose at a smaller capacity so that we could get those on Head Start and those on SSD, and then potentially others, but you know, those vulnerable populations or you know, whatever. I apologize, I don't know what.
No, I get you. I mean, we could definitely pull together different data related to that. I know, yeah, I mean, we could pull together just about whatever you wanted. Yeah, so we have the students who participate in the Head Start, and then we have the students that we're able to capture the ADA for them if they receive free and reduced lunch, they qualify rather. So those are the students. And we do also, yeah, like you're saying, offer special education support services through that school as well.
Exactly, based on what Katina was saying, that for kids who that is their early childhood special education placement, they would ideally continue to be in that building. So we would need staff for that.
Yeah.
And I'll just one other thought. I feel like I'm always Debbie Downer when it comes to COVID, but I just wonder if, you know, if we say that we're going to do in-person at Ambrose, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm thinking about it. But then I think about Camp Weevagy just had to close because somebody tested positive. And we're acknowledging the reality that little kids can't socially distance. And so I'm concerned about the possibility with community spread still being what it is, that it's going to be a false start, so to speak, and that I just don't have a lot of confidence right now that we can say that if they start in person, they're going to stay that way for any significant period of time. And then we've got the same issues with staffing and all of that we're talking about now. So I almost wonder if it's better to make a decision up front, but just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Amy, and I think staffing is going to be really tricky because anytime someone has any symptom, you're going to have to assume they have COVID and they're going to be out for 14 days, potentially 7 days at least. So logistically, I feel like it's going to be a nightmare, and I do worry about adding to the community spread.
Sandy, just as an FYI, Sandy has, you're right on all those things. Sandy has, we're increasing for buildings that don't have permanent subs. We have permanent subs in some buildings, people that fill in to sub when a teacher's out. We employ them on a regular basis. And then if they're already subbing in a classroom, then we go to our sub pool. But she has committed to, Sandy, is it a 4-day and a 5-day person at that school to support?
Yes. So it's we've added 4-day subs at this point to the schools, and Marty has always been able to select her person and will continue to do so. We're also working through, what does remote work or telework look like? So while I may have been exposed, but I'm perfectly fine, I'm not ill, could I still virtually, while I'm home, virtually still teach my class via Zoom or whatever, of course, because Ambrose has 2 staff members in it. So you would still have a staff member there. And so I could still teach, provide some supports from home virtually so that I could, because a lot of people are like, Sandy, I'm home, I can work, like, let me work, but again, I'm home just because I've exhibited a symptom. So those are some other things that we're talking through and processing, seeing how that looks. That is not, of course, the case for everyone, but that is also an option. So we're looking through some of those components to see, again, that's one of the benefits of Ambrose because you'd have 2 staff members there. And then again, where do your aides and your subs fit in, and them learning Canvas and getting trained in all of that so they can just easily, hopefully slide in and provide that support.
So just a housekeeping matter, John. Are you planning on coming back with a formal recommendation for Ambrose? Are you looking for direction from the board now? Are you looking for something else from the board now? Are you planning on coming back with a formal recommendation with regard to Ambrose? How do you want to proceed here?
Well, I direction would be helpful, and then to come back. I mean, everyone has got to make, again, for staffing purposes, for childcare purposes, for early childhood. I mean, we know with so many decisions that we're having to make that the certainty and knowing helps a whole lot. But so I really wanted to hear the board's reaction to it. And if there was a strong stance either way, well, that would be the determiner. But if not, then we still have to land on a decision. And so maybe it's collecting what information would you like to hear? If it's going to be coming back and setting a date right now to come back, in terms of, a week or so.
Okay. All right. Well, perhaps
I mean, what do you, yeah. I was going to say, what do you guys
go
think?
around and perhaps we go around and we just sort of see if people have got feelings specifically about how Ambrose might open, might not reopen, as well as questions and information that perhaps they're still looking for information from. So Keita, why don't we start off with you?
Oh, that's a rough one because I don't know. I just think about how, I say this all the time, but I just think about not only COVID, but then you're also going to have just the regular flu season kicks in immediately in the fall. And I don't know. Is it helpful towards Ambrose being open if we, I mean, I don't know if the staff they're probably not certified in SSD, but like I was thinking if we have a building open for kids who need one-on-one speech therapy or whatever other kind of special needs services that they may have, if Ambrose is the place for that, does that help keeping the cost of Ambrose open? You know what I mean? Like, is there a way to work that out?
Any special services like that would be at no cost, and provided by SSD teachers. So we don't compensate them.
So it doesn't
when
Ambrose.
Yeah.
Okay. If so, right now though, but they would only be at 20% capacity. Is that what you're?
Their classrooms would be reduced by approximately like 20%.
And how are the 20% chosen? Are they kids that have already been enrolled? Is it first come, first serve?
I could find out, Keita. It's my understanding. So the head start spots are guaranteed. The students, on the free and reduced lunch, the limited number of spots. And then it's my understanding that she just kind of had stopped enrollment. And so I don't think, but I can verify, is anybody going to be cut off that list? She just didn't keep taking people.
And of the people that wouldn't be there, are they going to be provided? Like the ones that aren't in the building, can they be then provided virtual services? I'm just trying to think of ways to create.
You mean those that haven't enrolled?
Well, I guess if she cut off, I guess I'm thinking if there's only 20% face-to-face, the other kids, could they still be provided virtual services or virtual learning?
Well, I don't think, I think, so when I say, I think it's my understanding that everybody who enrolled would be in the program. It just so happens that where she cut off enrollment, it was 80% of where it normally is. So you could open up a separate virtual program and see who's interested, but there's nobody, it's my understanding that wanted it and signed up for it that wouldn't be served by it.
And when, as of what date is that list? When did she stop taking?
I don't remember.
Okay, so, and I'm gonna have to jump off. I got a work call at 3. But for me, I would want to know how many kids, how many families are we talking about interested in being there in person if we start in person? And then second of all, do we have staff members who are able and willing, taking into account that they might have their own childcare needs, that they might have underlying health conditions that make it unsafe for them to return? Filter all those folks out. And then do we have people to staff the kids that want to be there safely? And that's what I would want to know before weighing in on this.
Okay, I think I haven't heard anything contrary to the staffing piece, but I could confirm all that stuff.
Also, would it be helpful to offer a virtual? I mean, I don't know how it worked in the spring. Would it be feasible, helpful? Are there families who would be willing to have a virtual option?
I'll just say, having put 3 kids through Ambrose Center, I love it, but it's not cheap. And so I don't know how many people are gonna want to pay that kind of money for a virtual experience.
Yeah, it's pretty costly.
Yeah. The other piece to think about, sort of piggybacking on what Amy said, is when you're talking about getting the list of kids that are interested, John, I think it's important that she reached back out to families now, because my guess is there are families that were enrolled, but now that their other students are going to be online, they're going to have to get care elsewhere. And because of that expense piece you just mentioned, they may not be able or willing to pay for both of those things.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So Amy, I know Amy's got a 3 o'clock hard stop. I've got a hard stop at 3 as well, by the way. I don't know if anybody else does. Other questions regarding Ambrose or other information requests?
No, I was just gonna reiterate. I think Christine actually said it earlier, just understanding the cost and benefit of minimally Head Start and SSD back at Ambrose.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't, personally, I don't think a virtual option makes much sense for that age group. So just throwing it out there. And then, yeah, I think starting there.
Thank you.
You know, John, when you reach back out for to the families that have enrolled, I think Alan raises a really good point, but also maybe this goes without saying, but it wouldn't hurt to ask them, say, hey, you know, given the reality that school may not be able to stay open and we would have to close if there's an infection, is this still something that you're interested in?
Yeah.
Because we know that's a possibility now. We didn't know that last spring.
Yeah.
Other comments?
No, that's exactly it's just kind of give us a better, at least me, a better idea of what are the costs and what are the benefits of reduced capacity of, you know, I agree with Alex on virtual, but what does it look like for each of these different scenarios? But like Ellen said, I didn't know that they weren't a part who had gotten that survey saying whether they'd be interested or not a week or two ago. So I do think it's great.
You know, they were actually in that survey. So I do have that data that I could.
Okay. And then maybe there's a little more work that Marty needs to do, you know, just did they have
we can
100%?
bring her on.
Mm-hmm.
We could answer these questions and any that come up after we're done here. And then we could also have Marty be on the line with us.
Perfect. Thank you.
That'd be great.
Well, I could coordinate the next meeting soon with Joe and David.
Okay, we'll do that. And certainly if anyone's got any questions that come from this, if you can send those through to John, and if you can copy me and Joe, that would be great. Yeah, I mean, I'm just as a comment, I'm kind of with Alex. I mean, I don't see how the virtual program really works, and obviously for what we're going to be charging the parents, I'd be very interested to know how many people would really be interested in that. And with Amy's comment before about Camp Webergee, I mean, it's you know, we've just seen that happen. I'm hard pressed to see that we'll manage to go a great length of time. Unfortunately, you know, I can see us having the same issue there. I mean, that was an outdoor program. This is going to be an indoor program. So it seems like it's one that's difficult to me, but at the same time, if you can come up with a recommendation that makes good sense for the parents, then I'm certainly happy to consider it. And I'm certainly obviously making sure we can provide the SSD and other services to the children that need those, and to make sure we've got somewhere to house those is something that's very important to me.
Okay.
Anybody, any more questions about anything related to opening of school sort of right now? Okay, as John said, I think we're going to end up, we'll end up having another special meeting to cover Ambrose and the Ambrose recommendations, and certainly if there are more questions related to more generally to the opening of schools, again, we can certainly handle those later. But if not, then let's we can move on to I know there are just a couple of consent item agenda items, so if perhaps we can get, if any, firstly, does anybody have any questions about any of the consent agenda items? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items, 4.02, 4.03, 4.04, and 4.05.
Second.
Okay, all in, any comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, anybody opposed? All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody making time during the afternoon. John, I really appreciate your work and that of all of your team. Thought it was an excellent presentation. You'd covered an awful lot of you'd covered all the stuff that we'd asked you to. So if we can get the class schedules and anything else that is going to be helpful out of the district website, that will be great. And look forward to hearing the feedback from the Q&As that you've set up with the parents as well. And I suspect we'll be talking in about a week. So thank you very much.
Sounds good. You bet.
I move we adjourn.
Absolutely. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.